Look at this black animal trying to look human in a luxury dojo. You don't belong here, you filth.
Chase Kellerman jeered into the microphone, his voice echoing off the cedar walls. He violently kicked her dirty water bucket, splashing filthy water all over Odessa's worn sneakers. Then snatched her mop and threw it across the floor.
Hey, garbage lady, show these fine people what 50 years of mopping does for your footwork, or is begging the only thing your kind is good at?
Cruel laughter exploded through the wealthy crowd. Chase stepped up, aggressively shoving his hand into Odessa's face, forcing the 49-year-old black woman back in her gray custodial uniform.
Don't you dare give me that ghetto attitude. Put your hands up and fight me! Let's see if scrubbing toilets gave you any real skills, or if people like you only belong in the mud.
Odessa stood frozen, absorbing the public humiliation in absolute silence. Chase grinned maliciously at his friend's live stream camera, hissing in her ear.
Fall down the second I touch you, or I'll have your black ass fired and scrubbing gas station toilets by midnight. Make me look good, sweetheart.
He had no idea. He had absolutely no idea that this invisible woman had spent 26 years training elite U.S. Army combat instructors, and that the Grandmaster of this academy was about to enter and drop to his knees to bow to her. Before the bones start breaking, comment below and tell me which country you're watching from. And make sure to subscribe right now, because the swift, brutal justice in this story is something you cannot afford to miss. Now, let's go back 11 months to see exactly how this toxic rich kid sealed his own destruction. The Ironwood Martial Arts Academy sat on 4 manicured acres in Fairfield County, Connecticut, behind a wrought iron gate with the academy's crest worked into the metal. It was the kind of place that charged more for a year of children's classes than most families paid in rent. The parking lot on weekday evenings looked like a European auto show. The lobby smelled of cedar and eucalyptus, and the training hall had 400 square meters of competition-grade tatami, floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and a wall of framed photographs documenting 40 years of championships, certification, and handshakes with famous men. Odessa Grant arrived every night at 9, 1 hour after the last class ended, driving a 14-year-old Honda with a rosary hanging from the mirror and a toolbox in the trunk. She was 49 years old, broad through the shoulders, with close-cropped graying hair and hands that looked like they had done real work. Because they had. She wore the gray uniform the contracting company issued her, her name stitched over the pocket in white thread. Oh, Grant. She cleaned the academy from 9 until 1 in the morning, 5 nights a week. She vacuumed the tatami with the special low-suction machine so the seams wouldn't lift. She wiped down 400 square meters of mirror without leaving a single streak. She disinfected the changing rooms, emptied the trash, polished the trophy cases, and dusted the frames on the wall of honor one by one, including the photograph of Grandmaster Elliot Grayson as a young soldier in 1996. Receiving his combatives instructor certification at Fort Benning, Georgia, a photograph that had been cropped tight around his proud young face, cutting away everything and everyone else. She dusted that frame every night. She never lingered on it. Lingering was a luxury for people who wanted to be seen. And Odessa Grant had spent months perfecting the art of being invisible. It hadn't always been that way. For 26 years, Odessa Grant had been anything but invisible. She had enlisted at 18 out of a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Georgia, because the Army was the only institution in America that promised to pay her tuition and mean it. She had planned to do 4 years. She did 26, somewhere in her second enlistment. A gruff master sergeant with cauliflower ears watched her throw a man 60 pounds heavier than her during a combatives drill, and told her she had something you couldn't teach. She spent the next 2 decades proving him right, judo first. On the army team, then jujitsu, then the long, brutal apprenticeship of the modern Army Combatives program, where she rose from student to instructor to master instructor, one of a handful of people entrusted with training the trainers. By the time she retired as a sergeant major, Odessa Grant held a 6th-degree black belt, had helped revise portions of the Army's hand-to-hand combat field manual, and had personally certified over 300 combatives instructors across every branch of the service. Some of those instructors went on to open academies of their own. One of them, Alanki, intense young sergeant from Connecticut named Elliot Grayson, had actually cried, the day she pinned his certification on him, because he had failed the course twice before she took him aside and rebuilt his footwork from the ground up. That was 1996. That was the photograph. Then came Raymond. 22 years of marriage to a quiet artilleryman who made her laugh until her ribs hurt. And never once, in 22 years, asked her to be smaller than she was. Then came the diagnosis. Then came 18 months of hospitals, and the folded flag, and the silence of a house in Bridgeport that suddenly had 1 coffee cup in the sink instead of 2. Odessa did not fall apart. Falling apart was not in her training, but something in her went quiet, the way a great engine goes quiet. And when her pension proved thinner than the recruiters had promised, and her daughter's family needed help with her grandson's therapy bills, she took a job with a commercial cleaning contractor. When the dispatcher asked if she had a preference, she looked at the list of available sites and saw the words Martial Arts Academy. And something old and warm moved in her chest. I'll take that one, she said. She told herself it was just a building. She told herself she just wanted to be near the mats again. The way a retired sailor takes a house near the sea. She did not tell the contractor what she was. She did not tell the academy. Her file said, "Oh, Grant. Custodial. Background check clear." That was all anybody asked. And that was all she offered. For the first month, it was almost peaceful. The academy at night was a cathedral. The tatami glowed under the security lights. The mirrors held the empty room like a held breath. Odessa worked slowly and thoroughly. And sometimes, when the mopping was done and the building was hers alone, she would stand at the edge of the mat in her socks and simply breathe. And the breathing was a kind of prayer. And the prayer had Raymond in it, and the army in it, and everything she had ever been. She never stepped onto the mat. Not in the beginning. It felt like trespassing on her own past, the people of Ironwood. On the rare occasions, their schedules overlapped with hers. Treated her the way expensive places treat the help. Which is to say, they didn't treat her at all. The evening instructors nodded without looking. The teenage students stepped over her extension cords. The front desk manager once handed Odessa a coffee cup with lipstick on the rim and said, "This was under the bench, sweetie," and walked away before Odessa could answer. Odessa absorbed it, the way she absorbed everything. Quietly, completely. She had stood at attention in worse rooms, in front of worse people. She knew exactly what she was worth, down to the decimal. And she had learned long ago that the world's failure to see your worth does not subtract from it. Her mother used to say, "A diamond in the mud is still a diamond. It's the mud that should be embarrassed." But there is a difference between being unseen and being targeted. And in her 12th week at Ironwood, Chase Kellerman came home from his father's ski lodge in Aspen, and Odessa Grant stopped being unseen. Chase Kellerman was 27 years old, and he had never once in his life been told no by anyone whose salary his father couldn't affect. His father, Richard Kellerman, ran a hedge fund out of Greenwich and had donated so much money to Ironwood over the years that the new training annex bore the family name in brushed steel letters. The Kellerman Pavilion. Richard Kellerman wrote checks the way other men cleared their throats. Reflexively, loudly, and mostly to remind the room he was there. Chase held a second-degree black belt. Earned honestly enough as a teenager and polished dishonestly ever since. He was tall, athletic, undeniably talented, and completely uninterested in the parts of martial arts that could not be filmed. He trained 4 evenings a week, always in the last class, always with an entourage. 2 training partners named Brody and Wilkes who laughed at everything he said and filmed most of it for his social media accounts, where Chase performed under the name Greenwich Savage for 300,000 followers who believed he was a warrior. Grandmaster Grayson, the Academy's founder, was 62 now and spent most of the year traveling. Seminars in Osaka, certification boards in Sao Paulo, a documentary crew following him through Okinawa. In his absence, the Academy was run by Coach Dan Merrick, a competent, tired man of 55 who had 2 mortgages, a daughter at Cornell, and a very precise understanding of what the Kellerman donations paid for. Coach Merrick was not cruel. He was worse than cruel. He was accommodating. The first incident was small. The way these things always start small. Chase's class ran late, one Thursday, past 9, and Odessa was already working the far corner of the training hall, wringing her mop in careful, silent rhythm. Chase, showing off a spinning kick for Brody's camera, misjudged his landing and stumbled. Nothing serious, just a stumble. But when the video played back, there she was in the background, a gray-uniformed black woman with a mop, ruining his shot. Hey! Chase snapped his fingers at her. Actually snapped his fingers. The way you'd call a dog. Mop lady. You're in my frame. Odessa looked up. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second. Long enough to register. Not long enough to challenge. Then she picked up her bucket and moved to the other end of the hall without a word. Chase watched her go. And something about the way she moved. Unhurried. Unbothered. Entirely unimpressed. Landed on him like an insult. Chase Kellerman had spent his whole life being reacted to. Feared. Admired. Flattered. Envied. This woman had looked at him the way you look at a parking sign. You believe that he said to Brody, loud enough to carry. Didn't even apologize. They just don't teach that anymore. Huh, Brody laughed. Because Brody was paid in proximity, after that, it became a game. Then it became a habit. Then it became something with teeth. Chase started staying late on purpose, stretching his sessions past 9 so their hours would overlap. He would kick over her wet floor sign and step around the puddle. Clicking his tongue, he would finish his water bottle and drop it. Not tosit. Drop it. 3 feet from the trash can she had just emptied, holding eye contact while it hit the floor. He called her Mop Lady until he learned her name from her uniform. And then he called her Odessa in a syrupy, drawn-out drawl that made the name itself sound like a joke. Odessa. You missed a spot. Odessa. My ghee smells weird. You washing these things or just blessing them? Odessa. Be honest. You ever actually watched people train? Or is it all just floors to you people? You people. He said it lightly. Deniably. The way his whole class of men had learned to say it, dressed in just enough ambiguity that objecting to it would make you the problem. Odessa had heard you people in every register America owned. From drill sergeants in the 90s who didn't believe women belonged in combatives, from officers' wives who assumed she was catering staff at her own promotion ceremony, from a car dealer in Stamford who saw her uniform before her credit score. She could write a taxonomy of you people. She said nothing. She wiped the mirrors. She kept the count, because here is what Chase Kellerman never understood. and what men like him never understand until it is far too late. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is inventory. The worst of it came in February. Chase and Brody stayed after class to film content, a series where Chase demonstrated street-lethal techniques on Wilkes, narrating in a whisper for the algorithm. Odessa worked around them, invisible as furniture. Until Chase got an idea. She saw the idea arrive on his face. She had seen that expression on bullies across 4 continents. It always looked the same, like a light going on in an empty house. Odessa, come here. We need a body. She kept mopping. Hey. He crossed the mat toward her. Microphone still clipped to his rash guard. I'm talking to you. We need someone to stand in for a demo. Grab defense stuff. You just stand there? Even you can manage that. I'm working. Odessa said. Her voice was low and even. It was the first full sentence she had spoken to him in 3 months. Working for who Chase spread his arms. Grinning at the camera Brody had. Of course. Kept rolling. Whose name is on that building? Sweetheart Kellerman. My family pays for this place. Which means my family pays for you. So when I say I need a body, what you say is, yes. Mr. Kellerman. The room went very still. Wilkes looked at the floor. Even Brody's grin flickered. Odessa straightened. And for one long moment, something moved behind her eyes that made Chase Kellerman, though he would never admit it, though he could not have named it, take half a step back. Then she picked up her bucket, walked past him, and started on the mirrors. Chase laughed too loudly to cover the half-step. Unbelievable. He told the camera, you try to include people? And this is the gratitude. The clip went up that night. Captioned, when the help has an attitude. It got 400,000 views. The comments were a sewer. Somebody found the Academy's tag. Somebody else zoomed in on her name patch. Odessa found out because of Amara. Amara Diallo was 15 years old. The daughter of a Senegalese home health aide and a Bridgeport bus mechanic, and the only scholarship student in Ironwood's advanced youth program. Grayson himself had spotted her at a public school tournament 2 years earlier and waived her fees on the spot. One of the last things he did before the traveling swallowed his calendar. She was quick, serious, and permanently aware, the way scholarship kids always are, of exactly how much space she was allowed to take up. Amara trained in the last youth class and often waited in the lobby for her mother's shift to end, doing homework under the trophy case, which meant Amara saw things. She saw the bottle drops. She saw the kicked-over signs. She heard the drawl Chase put on Odessa's name. And she recognized it, because a version of that drawl followed her own name down certain hallways too. And one cold Tuesday in February, she walked over to where Odessa was polishing the trophy glass, held out a thermos, and said, my mom makes ginger tea for her night shifts. She always makes too much. It's really good. Please. Odessa looked at the thermos, then at the girl. 15. Maybe. G folded under one arm with military neatness. Eyes that had already learned to watch rooms. What's your name? Baby. Amada. Amada. Odessa took the thermos with both hands. Deliberately. Like it mattered. Because it did. Thank you. It became a ritual. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Ginger tea and 10 minutes of talk while Odessa worked. Amara told her about the scholarship. About the girls who asked to touch her hair before sparring. About the assistant coach who kept forgetting to submit her name for the regional team. Odessa listened the way she had listened to 10,000 soldiers. Completely. And offered no advice unless asked. And when asked, offered advice so precise and so calm that Amara started writing it down. Don't spend your anger where it's cheap. Odessa told her once, wiping down the mirror in long, even strokes. Anger is money. Most people blow it on noise. You save yours. You spend it on becoming undeniable. That sounds like something a sensei would say, Amara said. Odessa's cloth paused on the glass for half a second. Then it moved again. It's something my husband used to say, she said, which was true, and was also not the whole truth. Because Raymond had been quoting her, it was Amara who showed her the video, pulled it up on her phone in the lobby, near tears with fury, saying they can't do that. That has to be against something. We should tell Coach Merrick. And it was Amara who stood outside Coach Merrick's office door 2 days later and heard, through the frosted glass, exactly what Ironwood was made of. Merrick had watched the clip. He had winced in all the right places. And then he had said, to the contracting company's supervisor on speakerphone, with Odessa sitting right across his desk, look, nobody's saying she did anything wrong, but the optics of a conflict with the Kellerman family, the annex. You understand. Maybe she'd be more comfortable at a different site. Or maybe just adjust her hours so they don't cross with the evening classes. Let's just make this go away. Make this go away. Not make this right. Away. Odessa sat with her hands folded on her lap and her spine straight. And she thought about a lifetime's worth of Merricks she had met. Men who mistook their own cowardice for diplomacy. She agreed. Politely. To shift her start time to 10. She thanked him for his time in a voice with no heat in it whatsoever, which unsettled Merrick far more than shouting would have. Though he couldn't have said why. That night she cleaned in silence. And when the building was empty and the mirrors were done, Odessa Grant did something she had not done in 3 years. She went to her cart, took out an old cookie tin from beneath the rags, and opened it. Inside, folded with ceremonial precision, was a black belt so old its edges had worn through to white, 6 discreet stripes stitched at the tip, and a photograph of a laughing man in an artillery cap. She stood at the edge of the tatami. She bowed to the empty hall, the way you bow to the dead, and to the past, and to whatever is left of yourself. Then she stepped onto the mat. If you had walked past the Ironwood Martial Arts Academy at midnight that spring, and if the security lights had been angled just right, you might have seen something through the tall windows that you would not have believed. You would have seen a middle-aged black woman in a gray custodial uniform, sneakers off, socks on the tatami, moving through kata with the kind of precision that cannot be faked, purchased, or performed, only earned, one repetition at a time, across decades. She started slow, the way you restart an engine that has been sitting. The first night, her knees complained and her timing dragged, and she was angry at her own body in a way that felt almost like grief. The second night was better. By the second week, the old architecture was reasserting itself. The footwork that a master sergeant had once called uncoachable, the hips that generated throwing power out of nothing, the stillness between movements that her students used to say felt like standing next to a loaded weapon with the safety on. She trained for herself. That is important. You need to understand that she was not preparing for Chase Kellerman. Because Chase Kellerman, in the honest arithmetic of Odessa Grant's life, did not rate preparation. She was training because Merrick's office had reminded her of something Raymond used to tell her in his last months, when the hospital ceiling was the only sky he had left. Des, don't you dare bury what you are just because I'm gone. That's 2 funerals. I only paid for one. She trained at midnight because midnight was hers. 500, throwing entries a night, against the wall-mounted crash pad. Footwork ladders across the seams of the tatami. Breathing drills in front of the mirrors she had polished herself. Watching her own reflection come back to her a night at a time. Like a photograph developing, she always finished by 1:30. She always dust mopped the tatami afterward to erase her own footprints. She always put the belt back in the cookie tin under the rags. For 6 weeks, the secret held. Then came the night Amara forgot her phone. It was a Thursday in April. Amara's mother had picked her up at 9:40. And it was nearly midnight when Amara realized the phone wasn't in her bag. It was still in the lobby, plugged in behind the trophy case. And her mother, exhausted but patient, turned the car around. The front door was unlocked for the cleaning shift. Amara slipped in quietly, found her phone, and was halfway out when she heard it. Rhythm. Bare feet on tatami. A sharp exhale. Repeated. Like a blade being sharpened. She should have left. She knew she should have left. Instead, 15 years old and incurably alert, she moved down the dark corridor to the training hall's glass doors and looked through. Amara Diallo had spent 2 years at Ironwood, watching black belts move. She had watched Chase Kellerman, who was genuinely athletic. She had watched visiting competitors, national medalists, one Olympian. So understand what it meant when Amara stood at that glass with her phone forgotten in her hand and her mouth open, watching a 49-year-old cleaning woman do things she had no words for. It wasn't flash. That was what shook her. There was nothing to film. Nothing the algorithm would love. It was the opposite of everything Chase performed. It was economy so total it looked supernatural. An entire body organized around a single purpose. No leaks. No noise. No doubt. Odessa moved through a throwing sequence against the crash pad. And the impact was so clean and so violent and so utterly controlled that Amara felt it in the floor through her shoes. And then Odessa stopped, mid-motion, without turning around, and said to the mirrors, "You forget something, baby." She had seen the reflection. Of course, she had seen the reflection. She had been watching rooms her entire life. Amara pushed the door open, with her heart hammering. "I'm sorry. My phone? I didn't mean. Come here." Amara crossed the hall. Up close, she could see the belt around Odessa's waist. The wear on it, the stripes on it. She counted the stripes twice, because her brain rejected the number the first time. 6. Amara whispered. "That's Miss Odessa. That's 6th Dan. Grandmaster Grayson is 7th. There's nobody else in this building past 3rd. I know what's in this building." Odessa said. "I clean it. Who are you?" Odessa looked at this child. This brilliant, furious, careful child who saved her anger and brought tea to invisible women. And she made a decision she had not planned to make. So she told her. Not everything, but enough. The army, the years, the manual, the 300 instructors. And when Amara, doing frantic math, said, "Wait, Grayson got certified at Fort Benning in the 90s. It's on the wall. The photo. Oh my God. The photo." Odessa just went and got her dust cloth and started on the mirrors, which was as close to a yes as she would give. "You can't tell anyone." Odessa said, "Not your mother. Not your friends. Especially not anyone here. But Chase, the video, if people knew what you are, he would never." Amara. Odessa stopped and faced her fully, and her voice dropped into a register the girl had never heard from her. Level and absolute. A voice built for rooms full of soldiers. "What I am is not a weapon for winning arguments with foolish boys. You hear me? I didn't hide this because I'm ashamed of it. I hid it because it's mine. The day I show it, it will be on my terms. For my reasons. At a time I choose. That's the whole lesson. Baby, that's the entire art. Everything else is just falling down correctly. Amara nodded slowly. Then she said, Will you teach me? And Odessa Grant, who had sworn she was done teaching, looked at the only person in that gilded building who had ever handed her something with both hands, and heard herself say, Tuesdays, midnight, tell your mother the truth, or don't come. For 5 weeks? In secret. In the sleeping academy, the finest instructor Ironwood had ever employed taught its only scholarship student for free. And Amara Diallo, who had spent 2 years being forgotten for regional teams, began, quietly, terrifyingly, to improve at a rate that made her coaches frown at their clipboards. It could have stayed that way. It should have stayed that way. But in the second week of May, Grandmaster Grayson's office sent out the gold-embossed invitations for the Academy's 40th anniversary Founders Demonstration Night. 200 donors, board members, and press, with Grayson himself flying home to host, and Richard Kellerman, writing the underwriting check, made one thing clear to Coach Merrick over lunch at his club. His son Chase would headline the demonstrations, and Chase, planning his content calendar for the biggest room of his life, watching his old video climb past 1 million views, had an idea. She saw the idea arrive on his face. That night in May, from across the training hall, like a light going on in an empty house, the academy did not look like itself on the night of May 16th. Caterers had colonized the lobby. The Kellerman Pavilion glowed with rented uplighting. 200 folding chairs faced the main tatami in perfect rows, filling with donors in blazers and cocktail dresses, board members, a reporter from the county magazine, a videographer on a gimbal, a banner hung over the mirrors. Ironwood, 40 years of excellence. Odessa had been asked, told, to work the event. The contracting company called it a special assignment. Keep the floors dry, the trash invisible, the restrooms immaculate, and herself unseen. She wore the gray uniform. She moved along the walls with her mop and her bucket. Nobody looked at her, which was the job, and nobody thanked her, which was also, apparently, the job. Grandmaster Grayson's flight from Osaka had been delayed. The program shuffled. Merrick, sweating in a suit, announced that the Grandmaster would arrive before the evening's end, and that in the meantime, the demonstrations would proceed. Youth forms, a weapons kata, a brick-breaking segment that made the donors gasp on cue. Then Chase Kellerman took the microphone. He was magnificent. In the way that empty things are magnificent, he demonstrated a flying armbar on the compliant Wilkes. He narrated his own highlight reel on the projection screen. He thanked his father, seated front row center, to warm applause. He had the room, and Odessa, working her mop along the far wall, watched him hold it, and understood, one beat before he said it, exactly what he was about to do. Because men like Chase cannot hold a room without spending someone. Now, folks, before we wrap up, Chase said, pacing the mat, I want to do something a little different, a little real. He smiled, and his eyes found the far wall. You know, we talk a lot about how martial arts is for everybody. Any age, any background, any walk of life. A pause, honed on 300,000 followers. So tonight, I'd like to invite a very special member of the Ironwood family out here. She keeps this place spotless. Ladies and gentlemen, our cleaning lady. He started the applause himself. The room, trained by open bars and good manners, followed. 200 faces swiveled toward Odessa Grant. Standing against the wall with her mop in her hands, she did not move, and her stillness, her refusal to perform, did something to Chase Kellerman in front of the biggest audience of his life. It humiliated him. And humiliated men with microphones are the most dangerous fools on earth. He crossed the floor toward her, and the mask came all the way off. "Look at this animal trying to look human in a luxury dojo," Chase jeered into the microphone, his voice echoing off the cedar walls. He drew back his foot and violently kicked her bucket. Filthy gray water exploded across the polished floor, splashing over Odessa's worn sneakers, soaking the cuffs of her uniform. Then he snatched the mop out of her hands and hurled it spinning across the floor, where it clattered against the folding chairs. "Hey, garbage lady, show these fine people what 50 years of mopping does for your footwork, or is begging the only thing your kind is good at." Cruel laughter exploded through the wealthy crowd. Not all of it, but enough. God help them. Enough. In the third row, Amara Diallo came halfway out of her chair, and the look Odessa gave her, one flick of the eyes, half a second, sat her back down. "Not yet. Baby. Not yours. Mine." Chase stepped in close, and he shoved his open hand into Odessa's face, palm against her cheek, forcing her head back, forcing the 49-year-old woman to stagger a step toward the wall. Somewhere in the crowd, one single person gasped. Only one. "Remember that too. Don't you dare give me that ghetto attitude." Chase snarled. "Put your hands up and fight me. Let's see if scrubbing toilets gave you any real skills. Or if people like you only belong in the mud." Odessa stood frozen, absorbing the public humiliation in absolute silence. Water dripping from her sneakers, her cheek burning where his hand had been. 11 months, distilled into one bright, ugly moment under the chandeliers. By the trophy case, Coach Merrick took a half step forward and stopped, because Richard Kellerman had turned in his front row seat to watch, smiling, and Merrick's daughter was at Cornell, and the annex had a name on it. He stopped. Remember that he stopped. This story will not forget it, and neither should you. Chase leaned in, grinning at Brody's live stream camera over her shoulder, and hissed in her ear. "Lo, poisonous," meant for her alone, forgetting, in his arrogance, that the microphone on his collar was still hot, still live, still feeding every syllable to the house speakers and to 11,000 strangers watching the stream. "Fall down the second I touch you, or I'll have you fired and scrubbing gas station toilets by midnight. Make me look good." Sweetheart, 200 people heard it. 11,000 people heard it. The county reporter heard it, and her pen stopped moving, because some sentences write themselves, and Odessa Grant, standing in the spreading puddle of her own mop water, looked past Chase Kellerman, at Amara, third row, fists white on her knees, at Merrick, frozen by the trophy case, at the cropped photograph on the wall of honor, young Elliot Grayson smiling at a hand the frame had amputated, at 200 comfortable people waiting to be entertained by her destruction. The day I show it, it will be on my terms, for my reasons, at a time I choose, her terms, her reasons, her time, and the time, at long last, was now. She bent down, slowly, deliberately, and untied her wet sneakers. She stepped out of them and set them side by side against the wall, neat as a soldier's boots. She unclipped the spray bottle from her belt and placed it on the floor with the calm of a woman laying down a rank she no longer needed. And she walked onto the tatami in her socks, into the center of the light, and turned to face him. The crowd tittered, delighted. The videographer moved closer. Brody's stream ticked past 12,000 viewers. "There she is," Chase crowed, backing to the center of the mat and rolling his shoulders, shaking out his arms, bouncing on his toes for the cameras. Okay, okay. Everybody give her a hand for being a good sport. Rules are simple. First, takedown wins. And don't worry, folks. He winked at the front row. I promise I'll be gentle. Odessa stood opposite him, arms at her sides. She did not bow, because a bow is a covenant, and Chase Kellerman had not earned one. She simply stood, weight settled, breath low, and waited. And something about her stillness moved through the front rows like a draft through a warm room. A few of the older black belts in the audience, the ones who had actually stood in real rooms with real people, shifted forward in their seats, frowning slightly. The way you frown at a familiar word in a foreign language, Chase came in the way. He always came in. The way his million-view clips came in. Fast, flashy, telegraphed from the shoulders. A lunging grip for her collar with all his weight riding his front foot. Utterly certain that the world would arrange itself around his intention. Because it always had. What happened next took 1.8 seconds. And the county magazine reporter would later spend 400 words failing to describe it. Odessa was not where his hands arrived. That was the first impossible thing. She had moved before he moved. Or seemed to. Reading the attack in his shoulders, the way she had read 10,000 attacks across 30 years. And her body simply declined to be present at the location Chase had reserved for it. His grip closed on air. His weight, committed and unclaimed, kept traveling. The second impossible thing was her hands. One settled on his sleeve and one on his collar. So lightly it looked like courtesy. Like a woman helping a drunk man find his coat. Then her hip turned. Her rear leg swept through the space his balance had already abandoned. And Chase Kellerman's feet left the ground together. He rotated in the air, like the hands of a clock. She could have driven him down. Understand that, with that entry, at that angle, at her level of control, she could have spiked him into the tatami, hard enough to end far more than the match. Every real black belt in that room saw it. Instead, at the peak of the arc, her grip changed, softened, gathered, and she placed him, laid him flat on his back with a controlled, resonant slap of the mat, unhurt, unharmed, and unmade. Then she stepped back, released his sleeve, and stood over him with her arms at her sides, breathing exactly as slowly as she had been breathing before. The room made no sound at all. 12,000 people watched a live stream of silence. And this is the moment where Chase Kellerman was offered his last exit. Every bully is offered one. Exactly one. And history is nothing but the ledger of what they did with it. He could have laughed. He could have taken her hand. He could have saved some scrap of himself. Instead, Chase Kellerman lay on his back under the chandeliers of his father's pavilion. Listened to that silence, with 12,000 witnesses inside it, and chose annihilation. He came up off the mat with a scream that had nothing of sport left in it. No stance, no form, just a rich man's rage in a black belt, swinging a full-power right hand at the head of a 49-year-old woman. The crowd screamed. Amara screamed. The punch was real. The punch was meant. The punch hit nothing. Odessa slipped it by 4 inches. The width of a Bible. And let him stumble past. He spun and swung again. Wilder. And she wasn't there again. And now he was sobbing with fury. And now, God, forgive him. He did the thing that no one who saw it would ever forget. He lunged for the mop. Her mop. Lying by the chairs where he'd thrown it. He snatched it up in both hands and swung it at her skull like an axe. In front of 200 donors. In front of his own father. in front of the world. The sound the room heard next was wood. Odessa caught the handle mid-swing with one hand. Dead. Absolute. Like the mop had hit a fence post. For one heartbeat, Chase Kellerman stood there, both hands on the weapon, staring into the eyes of the woman on the other end of it, and 12,000 viewers watched him understand. In real time. Live. Forever. Exactly what he had spent 11 months spitting on. Wrong tool. Baby, Odessa said quietly. That one's for honest work. Then she took it from him. She turned her wrist, stepped through, and the mop was hers, and his balance was hers, and his arm was hers. And the throw that followed was not a placement. It was a verdict. She put him down through his own shoulder, with the whole weight of 30 years behind it, pinned the arm, and rode him flat. And when he thrashed against the lock like a fool, screaming threats, something in his shoulder gave way with a wet, ugly pop that the microphones caught and the internet would loop 10 million times. She released him instantly. Instantly. That is the part the commentators would argue about for weeks. The part that separated her from him forever. The moment the joint failed, her hands opened, and she stepped away. And she stood at a respectful distance while Chase Kellerman, second-degree black belt, Greenwich Savage, heir to the pavilion, curled on the tatami of his family's monument, cradling his ruined shoulder and weeping in front of everyone he had ever wanted to impress. Odessa looked down at him without triumph and without mercy, which are, if you think about it, the same absence. You'll heal, she said. That's more grace than you gave me. And that was when they heard it. A single, sharp intake of breath from the doorway, and a voice that thousands of students across 40 years knew better than their own fathers' voices. A voice now cracking on the first word. Sergeant Major, Grandmaster Elliot Grayson, stood in the entrance of his own academy. Travel coat still on, suitcase handle still in his hand, staring at the woman in the gray custodial uniform, standing in the center of his tatami with a mop in one hand, and in front of 200 donors. His entire board. And one live stream now past 40,000 viewers. The 7th-degree Grandmaster and founder of the Ironwood Martial Arts Academy let go of his suitcase, walked onto the mat, and dropped to his knees. You have to understand what a kneeling bow means in that world. In 40 years, students of Ironwood had watched Elliot Grayson bow 10,000 times, the crisp standing bow to opponents, the measured bow to visiting masters, the shallow, gracious nod to donors. But the kneeling bow, knees to the floor, palms flat, forehead lowered nearly to the mat. That bow is not etiquette. That bow is lineage. It is reserved for the dead, for the founders of founders, for the hands that made your hands. Elliot Grayson knelt on the tatami of his own academy, in front of his entire board, and gave that bow to the cleaning lady. Sergeant Major Odessa Grant, he said, and his voice carried to the back wall, because the room had forgotten how to breathe. Master Grant, 6th Dan, Master Instructor, United States Army Combatives Program. He raised his head, and there were tears standing openly in the eyes of a 62-year-old Grandmaster. You have been cleaning my school. Somebody had to. Odessa said, Your evening crew misses the mirror seams. A sound came out of Grayson that was half laugh, half sob. He rose, crossed to her, and took her right hand in both of his. Both hands. Deliberata. Like it mattered. And he turned to the 200 frozen faces of Founders Night. I want everyone in this room to listen to me very carefully, he said, because I am only going to tell this story once, and some of you badly need to hear it. He told them about a twice-failed sergeant from Connecticut in 1996. Washed out of the combatives instructor course, packing his bags at Fort Benning, when a young black woman instructor, the youngest master instructor on the cadre, the one some of the old guards still refused to salute in the parking lot, pulled him into an empty training bay at 9 at night and said, "Your footwork is a lie. You keep telling your hips, and we are going to fix it." He told them about the 3 weeks she rebuilt him from the floor up, on her own time, after her own duty day, asking nothing. He told them that every technique taught in this building, every certificate on that wall, every dollar this academy had ever earned, stood on the foundation she poured into him in that bay. "You have a photograph of it," he said, pointing at the wall of honor, his hand shaking. 1996. My certification. Some designer cropped it years ago to fit the frame, and I was too busy to object. And God forgive me, I stopped seeing what was missing. He looked at Odessa. "The hand pinning that certification to my chest belongs to the woman your evening classes have spent this year stepping over. The woman that boy just called an animal. On my mat." Into a live microphone. Then his gaze found Chase Kellerman, who had been helped to a chair at the edge of the mat, gray-faced, his arm in a caterer's improvised sling, his live stream still running in Brody's paralyzed hand, comments scrolling like a stock ticker of his own collapse. "I landed 40 minutes ago," Grayson said quietly. "I stood in that doorway long enough to see all of it. Mr. Kellerman, the bucket, the mop, your hand in her face, your generous offer, on a hot microphone, to have her fired by midnight." He let that sit. "And I want you to hear the part that is going to follow you for the rest of your life. Her worth was never in the belt. The belt only measures it. She deserved your respect when you thought she was nobody, because there is no such thing as nobody." Richard Kellerman was on his feet now. Front row. Doing what money does when it is frightened. "Elliot. Let's everyone take a breath. The boy is injured. That woman assaulted my son in front of 200 witnesses. Boys get carried away. But this, I'll have lawyers here by morning, and I'm sure Miss Grant and I can come to an understanding. The foundation would be glad to." "Sit down, Richard." The room actually gasped. Richard Kellerman had not been told to sit down since prep school. 200 witnesses. Grayson repeated softly. "Yes. 200 witnesses watched your son kick a bucket of water over a working woman, shove his hand into her face, threaten her livelihood into a live microphone, and swing a wooden pole at the skull of a 49-year-old grandmother. On camera. On his own camera. Richard." She caught a weapon aimed at her head, and she stopped. The moment he stopped being a threat, there is not a courtroom in Connecticut that will read it any other way. And you know it. And your lawyers will bill you handsomely to tell you the same thing. So sit down." He turned back to the room. To the donors and the board and the reporter writing so fast, her pen tore the page. "Chase Kellerman, you are expelled from this academy. Permanently. Your rank was earned in this house, and it shames this house. You will leave your belt with the front desk on your way to the hospital." A murmur swept the chairs. "Richard, the pavilion naming agreement has a conduct clause. My attorneys will be returning this year's underwriting in full on Monday. And the letters come off the building in July. You'll want to alert your accountant." He paused. "And Dan, my office. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Chase tried. Then, you should know that he tried. Because it matters what trying looked like. Propped in his chair. Ruined arm cradled against his chest. He did not apologize to Odessa. Even then, even there, he could not physically form the sentence. He appealed past her. To Grayson, the way his whole life had trained him to appeal to the nearest man with power. Grandmaster. With respect. I didn't know who she. Say it. Odessa said. It was the first time she had spoken above a murmur, since the throw, and her voice went through the room like a bell. Chase turned. She had not moved from the center of the mat, mop in one hand, standing in the light, like she had been born there. Terms hers. Reasons hers. Time hers. Finish the sentence. Mr. Kellerman, you didn't know who I was. She let it hang. That's the confession. Baby. That's the whole crime. Right there. Wearing a bow tie. You thought respect was something I had to be somebody to deserve. 11 months you spent on me. Snapped your fingers at me. Dropped your trash at my feet, and looked me in my eye while it fell. Put me on the internet for a million strangers to laugh at. A grown woman. Working an honest job at midnight, so her grandbaby can get his therapy. And tonight you called me an animal. In front of 200 people. And kicked dirty water over my shoes. And put your hand in my face. And swung my own mop at my head. And not once, not one single time, did it cross your mind that I might be a human being with a whole life behind me? Because to you, this uniform was the whole story. She took one step toward him. And Chase Kellerman, 2nd-degree black belt, 27 years old, flinched so hard, his chair scraped. You want to know the difference between us. It was never the Dan ranks. The difference is this. I knew exactly who you were the first week I met you, and I mopped around you anyway. Because unlike you, I don't need a person to matter before I treat them like they do. She looked at him a moment longer, not with hatred, which he could have survived, but with something far worse, a complete and final assessment. Filed and closed. Now get off my mat. My mat. Nobody in that room, then or ever, thought to correct her. Chase Kellerman was walked out through a silence with 200 witnesses in it. And at the front desk, one-handed, shaking, he unknotted his black belt and left it coiled on the counter like something shed. By the time the ambulance doors closed, the clip of the mop catch, Brody's own live stream, beautifully framed, forever, had been screen-recorded 30,000 times. By midnight, it had a name, The Verdict. By morning, Greenwich Savage was the most famous cautionary tale in American martial arts. His sponsors were gone by lunch. His hot microphone threat was a national headline by dinner. His million-view humiliation video was deleted far too late. The internet, which had laughed at Odessa Grant in February, spent the rest of May learning her name properly. Dan Merrick arrived at Grayson's office at 6:55 the next morning with his resignation letter already typed. Because Dan Merrick was, above all things, a man who prepared for the weather. Instead of questioning why he lived somewhere it always rained. Grayson read the letter. Then he set it down, slid it back across the desk, and said, "Not yet. First, you're going to sit there and tell me everything. Every incident. Every complaint you softened. Every hour you moved. All of it. In Arda. Out loud." It took 40 minutes. Merrick did not spare himself, which was the only respectable thing he did that year. When he finished, Grayson was quiet for a long time. You know what the worst part is? Dan, you're not a bigot. I'd almost respect that more. A bigot at least believes something. You're an accountant of other people's cruelty. You saw everything. You calculated everything. And you decided her dignity was the cheapest line item on the sheet. Last night, a woman got a hand shoved in her face in my house. On a stage you built for it. And you stood by the trophy case and protected your mortgage. Grayson picked up the resignation letter, folded it, and tore it in half. Rejected. You don't get to disappear into a severance package and tell yourself a soft story about it. Here's what happens instead. You're demoted to junior staff. Effective today. Full pay cut. And for the next year, you will personally run the free community classes we are about to build. Nights, weekends, Bridgeport, all of it. Under the direction of the new head of instruction. You will watch, up close, every single week, exactly what kind of people you decided didn't matter. And at the end of that year, she will decide whether you stay. You heard me. The offer itself happened that same afternoon. And it did not go the way Grayson planned. He had prepared a speech. He drove to Bridgeport himself. To a neat little house with a folded flag in a triangle case visible through the front window, and sat at Odessa Grant's kitchen table while she poured coffee, and offered her everything. Head of instruction at Ironwood. A salary with a comma in a new place. Her name on the wall in letters bigger than Kellerman's had been. No. Odessa said. Grayson blinked. No, not like that. She sat down across from him with her own cup. Elliot. Listen to me. You want to take the woman from the viral video and put her name on your wall so the story has a pretty ending and your donors can feel clean again. I understand it. It's good business. And it's even good-hearted. But I didn't survive 11 months of that boy, so I could become a decoration for the same building. She wrapped both hands around her cup. Here's what I'll say yes to. You want my name. Then we build something my name means. She told him what she had been thinking about since midnight. Standing at the edge of his tatami with her husband's photograph in a cookie tin, every night at 1 a.m. I drive home past the bus depot and the hospital and the office towers. And you know what I see, my people. Cleaning women, waiting alone at bus stops in the dark. Nurses' aides, walking to parking garages, at the end of a double shift. Hotel housekeepers. Security guards. Dishwashers. The whole invisible shift. Elliot. The people who keep every building in this country running. Who can't afford 1 month of what your students pay. And who are more likely to need what we teach than any donor's kid will ever be. She tapped the table once. Softly, like a gavel. So here's the deal. I'll run your instruction. And in exchange, Ironwood opens its doors. Are free. 3 nights a week. 10 to midnight. To every night shift worker in this county. Real training. Real rank. Their own program. With a budget. In writing. Permanent. Not charity. Curriculum. And we'll call it what they've been calling us our whole lives. Which is, invisible. She smiled. And for the first time, Grayson saw the instructor from the empty bay in 1996. Whole and undimmed. The Invisible Belt program. And the first student is already enrolled. 15 years old. Takes her tea with ginger. Grayson put out his hand. Then he thought better of it. Stood up from the kitchen table. And bowed instead. The first Invisible Belt class met on a Tuesday night in June. 9 students showed up. 4. Cleaning women from Odessa's old contracting company. 2 nursing aides from Bridgeport Hospital. A hotel housekeeper. A 61-year-old parking attendant named Gus. And a bus driver who had been assaulted on her route the previous winter and hadn't slept properly since. They stood at the edge of the tatami and borrowed gis. In the same hall where 200 donors had once gathered, and most of them had the look Odessa knew better than her own reflection. The look of people waiting to be told they were in the wrong room. Odessa walked out in her white-tipped, 6-striped belt, faced them, and bowed first. Let me tell you the 2 rules of this program, she said. Rule 1. In this room, nobody waits. You've waited your whole lives. For buses, For paychecks. For people to see you. Not here. The moment you step on this mat, you are the main event. Rule 2. She looked down the line, meeting 9 pairs of eyes, one at a time. Unhurried. You already survived harder things than anything I will ever teach you. Every one of you. I'm not here to make you strong. I'm here to introduce you to the strength you've been carrying up other people's stairs for years. The bus driver started to cry, quietly, and was embarrassed. And Odessa crossed the mat and stood in front of her and said, "Good. That's not weakness, leaving the body. Baby. That's the waiting." By September, there were 40 students. By Christmas, Nievente, and a wait list. And a second location in a church gymnasium in Bridgeport that Grayson underwrote personally with the money he no longer took from Richard Kellerman, Amara Diallo. 16 now, and terrifying at regionals. Funny how quickly her name stopped being forgotten from tournament rosters. Assisted every Tuesday class. Taught the children's section. And wore, on a chain under her G, a key to the academy that Odessa had given her with both hands. The county magazine ran its story that fall. Not about the fight, about the program. The photograph on the cover was Odessa Grant in her gi, kneeling to adjust the belt of a 70-year-old former custodian named Dolores. And the headline read, "The strongest person in the room." The story went national. Within a year, martial arts schools in 11 states had launched night shift programs modeled on the invisible belt. Most of them, after their owners received the same short email from a 7th Dan Grandmaster in Connecticut, which read, in its entirety, "Ask yourself who cleans your school. Then ask yourself what else you don't know about them. Call me when you're ready." And the photograph on the wall of honor was replaced. The original, full frame, uncropped, Fort Benning, 1996. A young sergeant with tears on his face, and pinning the certification to his chest. A young black woman in uniform, caught mid-laugh. Whole, Grayson hung it himself, one head higher than every other frame on the wall, and beneath it a small brass plate that read, "Sergeant Major Odessa Grant. Who was always here? You'll want to know about Chase. People always want to know about the Chase Kellermans, which is its own small tragedy. That even in the ruins, they command the curiosity, fine. Here it is. The shoulder healed in 4 months. The name never did. The sponsors never came back. The followers stayed for the wreckage. Then drifted. His father's friends' firms found, one after another, that his resume wasn't quite the fit. The district attorney reviewed the footage of a grown man swinging a wooden pole at a woman's head and offered him a deal. Anger management, community service, and a restraining order's distance from the academy. And his father's lawyers advised him, through their teeth, to take it. And he took it. Richard Kellerman, who had spent a lifetime buying outcomes, discovered that reputation is the one market that does not take his calls, and quietly resigned from 3 boards before he could be asked to. The brushed steel letters came off the pavilion in July. The workmen who removed them were, of course, invisible shift men. And one of them, this is true, and it is the kind of true that makes you believe in something, was enrolled in Odessa's Thursday class. 14 months after Founders Night, Chase Kellerman walked into the church gymnasium in Bridgeport during a Tuesday session and stood at the door. No camera, no entourage, no belt. His community service hours were long finished. Nobody had sent him. He waited. Possibly, for the first time in his life, until the class ended. And then he crossed the floor to where Odessa was stacking pads, and the whole room went still and watched. He didn't perform it. That was how she knew it was real. No speech. No tears staged for redemption. He stood in front of her, a man who had lost every audience he'd ever had, and said 5 words. "I'm sorry. I was nobody." Odessa looked at him for a long moment. Then she handed him the stack of pads. "Rack these," she said. "White belts sweep the mats after class. All of them. Every night. And Mr. Kellerman." She waited until he met her eyes. "In this room, there's no such thing as nobody. You'll learn it with a broom in your hand. Same as I taught everything else." He came back Thursday. He swept. As far as anyone knows, he is sweeping still. And getting better. At all of it. One repetition at a time. Which is the only way anyone ever has. Dan Merrick finished his year of community classes and stood in Odessa's office while she decided his future, and what she said was this: "You watched for 11 months and did nothing. Then you watched for 12 months and did everything I asked. That's not redemption. Dan, that's just the beginning of paying attention. You can stay. But the day you go quiet in a room again to protect yourself, you'll leave this building faster than that boy left the mat." He stayed. He runs logistics for 6 invisible belt locations now. And he has learned, at 56, to be the first voice in the room instead of the last. Amara Diallo took silver at States at 17 and gold at 18, and turned down 2 college programs to accept the one that let her keep teaching Tuesdays. On the night of her black belt ceremony, it was not Grandmaster Grayson who tied the belt around her waist. Although he stood beside the mat with his hand over his heart, it was Odessa. Kneeling. Both hands. Deliberate. Like it mattered. Because it did. And when she finished the knot, she looked up at this child who had once crossed a lobby with a thermos of ginger tea and said, loud enough for the whole room, "First lesson you ever taught me. You see somebody the world is ignoring. You walk over there and you hand them something with both hands. Everything else I know is just falling down correctly." And Odessa herself, she still arrives at 9 some nights. Long after the last class, when the building is a cathedral and the tatami glows and the mirrors hold the empty room like a held breath, the new night custodian, a Guatemalan grandmother named Rosa, who is paid a living wage now, with benefits, because the head of instruction reviews the cleaning contract personally, knows to leave the training hall for last on those nights. And if you walked past Ironwood at midnight and the security lights were angled just right, you might see a woman moving through kata with a photograph of a laughing artilleryman propped against the mirror. And you might notice that she is smiling. And you might finally understand that she was never hiding at all. She was resting. There is a difference. The mud never did learn it. The diamond never needed to. So let me leave you with this. And I want you to sit with it. Because it's not really about a dojo. And you know it. Somewhere tonight. In your city. A woman is cleaning an office you'll walk through tomorrow without seeing her. A man is guarding a lobby, waving through people who have never once asked his name. Somebody is emptying trash cans under fluorescent lights at 1 in the morning. And inside that person is a whole universe. 26 years of service. Or a medical degree from a country that no longer exists. Or a voice that used to fill churches, or a black belt folded in a cookie tin. And the only reason you don't know it is that you decided the uniform was the whole story. Chase Kellerman's sin was never that he disrespected a master. Hear me on this. Because the internet got it wrong, and keeps getting it wrong. If Odessa Grant had really been nobody, no belt, no army, no photograph on the wall, every cruelty he committed would have been exactly as ugly. The kicked bucket, the hand in her face, the word animal, spoken into a microphone, The reveal didn't create the crime. It just turned the lights on so the room could finally see what had been happening in the dark all along. Respect that has to be earned by rank isn't respect. It's a receipt. Real respect is what a 15-year-old girl gave with a thermos of ginger tea to a stranger with a mop, expecting nothing, knowing nothing. Because Amara Diallo understood something 200 wealthy adults did not. That every human being you will ever meet is somebody's whole world, and carries a whole world, and deserves to be handed things with both hands. The strongest person in the room is often the one cleaning it. The wisest voice in the building might be pushing the cart down the hall, and the person you stepped over this morning may be the very hand that once built the ground you're standing on. So here is my challenge to you tonight. Tomorrow, find one invisible person in your life, the custodian, the security guard, the aide, the driver. Learn their name and use it. That's it. That's the whole assignment. You will be astonished at what you've been walking past. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever been treated as invisible? Judged by your uniform, your job, or your skin? Before anyone bothered to learn your story. And be honest. Have you ever been the one doing the judging? Your stories are why this channel exists. And I read every single one. If you believe, like I do, that dignity should never require a reveal, hit that like button so this story reaches someone who needs it. And subscribe. Because tomorrow, I'm bringing you the story of a homeless veteran ordered out of a bank lobby 30 minutes before the branch manager learned whose name was on the founding charter. You do not want to miss it. Until then, bow first. It costs nothing. It means everything. Have a wonderful day.